So now that the project has loaded, this is the virtual production template world that will load up. If you've loaded up one of the other templates, then you might load into a world with a chair or an empty world level, that sort of thing. So all the templates have different opening files, and you can change the opening files and to load up your world straight away to save time later on. But I'll show you how to do that in a later episode. So, like I said, this is the template world. First of all, we need to know how to move around. Now, I see quite a lot of people using the scroll wheel. You can scroll back and forward to move forwards and backwards, but this is a game engine, so being able to move around your world like a game would be more useful, even if you're making a film like we're going to be doing. So to do that, you need to press, right click, and then you can use WASD like in a game to move backwards, forwards, left and right. And to go up and down, you use E to go up, Q to go down. You can also zoom in and out using Z and C as well, whilst pressing right click. So remember, right click is the thing to press. If you press left click, you're just going to select whatever you're looking at. Okay, and then you can also move the mouse around, of course, and that will change the way that you are moving. Now, you might notice that the camera moves at a very consistent speed. If you want to speed up or slow down whilst flying around, you can do so by scrolling forwards or backwards. That speeds you up or slows you down whilst you fly around. Or you can change the base speed of your camera using the camera button here. Just click on this and then you can change your speed up or down. And then also you can change the scale. Now, the important thing to remember is when you change the scale, this is to help you move around a larger environment. So only change this if you're creating really, really big environments or level designs or whatever, okay? So just to take you through the user interface. So in the top left corner, we have the selection mode. This shows whatever mode we're going to be in. So if you click on this, you can see that there are 7 modes there, which you can use the shortcuts Shift 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 to move between them, or you can just come to this drop-down menu and select whatever mode you're going to go into. Now, the main modes that we're going to be looking at are selection mode, landscape mode, and foliage mode. We're currently in selection mode, and surprise, surprise, that's the one that lets you select and move objects. Landscape mode, surprise, surprise, is where you create your landscapes, and foliage mode is where you can add in your grass, trees, bushes, rocks, trees, that sort of thing. And that's what we're going to need to create our first level. Moving over to the right, I call this the create button. I actually think it's called the actors panel button or something like that. But I never actually use this drop down menu other than to add in my place actors panel. So you can use this menu to add in any actors. So actors are what we call the objects that you can add in as a base from the actual game. So, for example, your lights, a level sequence if you're going to make a film, or any visual effects like clouds, skies, that sort of thing that you don't need to add in to the game, or add into the game engine, I should say. These things are called actors in Unreal, and you can add these in through this drop-down menu. I find this drop-down menu a little bit annoying to use, so I personally prefer to use the Place Actors panel, and this adds in a nice little drop-down menu. Normally it's not docked to the sidebar, it would normally come in like this, but like you saw me do there, you can right-click on it and click Dock to Sidebar, and this just allows you to use that menu, but slightly more easily. So I can now search for a directional light and find my directional light and drag that in, okay? This is also how you access Quixel Bridge. If you don't see this, you need to hop back to the Epic Games launcher and click Install Plugins. We are going to be using the Quixel Bridge later on, so you need to make sure you've got that installed for whatever version of Unreal you're working with. I do suggest if you're working in Unreal 4 that you stop and move to Unreal Engine 5. It's much better to use. It's much more supported now as well. And Quixel Bridge is built into Unreal 5 as well, so it just makes transferring assets from there into your project much easier. We're going to ignore the blueprint button for now, but that's more focused towards game design, but it absolutely can be used for film design, but we're not going to be using that in this series. Next button, however, is going to be the sequencer button. This is how you add in a master or level sequence, and this is how you're going to animate things. So this is going to be quite an important button. Now this is the play, stop button, fast forward, whatever you want to do. These symbols should be fairly recognizable. They're quite universal symbols. We're not really going to use this very much because the sequencer has its own play and start buttons in it. But sometimes if you accidentally click play or one of the shortcuts for it, and then your world suddenly changes, you can't move anything, you've not got a click to select anything, it's probably because you've accidentally entered simulation mode, which is what this is called. You just need to press escape and then you'll exit back out. And then the rest of these we're not going to really worry about. Again, these are mostly for game design, and we're going to be focused on using Unreal for virtual production point of views. Underneath, we have the perspective, lit, show, and then scalability as well. These settings are all to do with what your viewport is looking at. So the perspective button, surprise, surprise, changes the perspective. So we're in perspective mode, which allows me to move freely throughout the level, but you can change to top, bottom, left, right, front, back, the usual sort of arrangements that you'd see in any 3D software. And then also you can snap to any cameras that you've got in your scene as well. Now, once you're in a camera, so I'm now piloting the camera, I am moving what the camera is looking at as well, using the exact same controls as what we were using earlier to move around the level. And I can still select things and move things around, but if I move, the camera is going to move. And this is important to note, which is why they put in this little helpful symbol here that says pilot active, meaning that you are in a camera. And to get out, we just press the little eject button here. And now we are not moving the camera, which you can see it has moved slightly. So our next menu to look at is the lit menu, which sounds funny. But if you click on that, this basically shows you the viewport modes that we can have. So lit and unlit refer to the lighting situation. So obviously lit is when you have your lighting included, and unlit would be the unlit version. So everything becomes very, very flat. You then have the wireframe view as well. And as the name suggests, this shows you the wireframe of your world. So this can be really useful if you're just trying to look at where is quite densely packed with your polygons. If it's running slow, you might want to remove something here. So like the spheres down here are quite intense, so you might want to remove those. Next up is sort of the detailed lighting and lighting only and reflections. This is another way to look at your lighting systems, but we're not going to spend much time in this. And then the ones underneath this as well are all sort of to do with game design. So the collisions and visibility collision, that sort of thing. But we're not going to look at those. We might dip into the level of detail, just because this is a helpful viewport for us to look at if we're trying to optimize our level design, as well as the Nanite and Lumen system as well. So Lumen is the lighting system we're going to be using, and Nanite is the system for the triangle system that you may have seen Epic sort of mentioning on their social media and on YouTube as well. And this is the way that they embed their level of detail system really, really efficiently to have billions and billions of triangles in one scene. We also have the show menu. Now, this is the way we can remove things in our actual world. So I'm just going to go back into lit mode. If we were to have foliage or something, foliage can slow down your scene considerably, particularly if you've got like a million blades of grass. And so sometimes you just need to come in and remove that. Same thing with your atmosphere, your clouds, that sort of thing. You can see all of these things listed down here. So I think foliage is under advanced. There you go. So foliage, we could click on that and remove any foliage that is involved in the scene. And this just removes that from the viewport. It won't remove it from the render, but it will remove it from the viewport, just so you can run in your scene slightly easier as well. And that's where we come to the scalability. Now, scalability is to do with how much computer resources you want to dedicate to this as well. So we're going to be actually working in cinematic for a lot of this. Now, I've got quite a beefy computer, so I'll be all right running in cinematic. You might see me drop down for epic once we start adding in the foliage, just to make everyone's life easier. But you can also pick custom amounts of this. Now, this helps you run on your lower power computers, basically. Or if you have a really, really intense level that's just like zapping all of your computer power, then you can just switch it to low or medium, or maybe high, that sort of thing. Or you can set it to auto, and it will try and maintain a good frame rate for you. So on the top right hand side of our viewport, we have these controls here, which are to do with how we want to select things. So we can select objects, but you can see it no longer lets me move the object. That's because we're now in select mode. If you click on the next one over, which is the most commonly used, you can use select and translate, and you can see we get the gizmo back, so I can move things around. You then have the rotate as well. So if you want to rotate something but you now can't move it, then you can use that button, and then the scale button as well. Now, the most easy way to do this is to leave it on select and translate mode, because it always lets you move things, but you can then press W, E, or R to switch between those three modes that we have, the translate, rotate, and scale modes as well. So confusingly, rotate is not R. That's something to remember. Rotate is E, and scale is R. And you can see that the gizmo changes. Now, if I can line myself up, you will see that you have the blue, red, and green, or red, green, blue, and then also this white cube here as well. This allows you to change what axes you're working on. So red is X, green is Y, and Z is blue. And then the white one is all of them. You might be able to see as well, let me see if I can get really close to this. You might be able to see, if I just make it slightly easier to view, there we go, these diagonal lines. This allows you to affect two axes without affecting the other. So you can see I'm on the Z and X here, but it's not affecting the Y, okay? So that allows us to change our scale there, and you can do the same thing on the translate as well. So you can translate across two axes, but not across all of them, or just one of them as well. Okay. Now, next two buttons are where you want the object to snap to. So if we have it in sort of global mode, then it will do the global X and Y. So you'll see when I rotate this, the gizmo does not change. But if I click on this and it swaps to object mode, so it's like this square with the three axes on, you can see when I rotate this, suddenly my gizmo is now rotated to that object. Okay. Next one here is the snapping offset. Now, I tend to use these controls over here just because it's slightly easier to use. The position grid snapping allows you to choose where and how often it snaps. So it's currently set to the default, which is 10, but this can be from 1 to 10,000. Or if you want just like freeform, you just click the grid button and now it allows you to smoothly drag everything. Same thing happens with the rotate and scale. So you can see I'm currently rotating every 10 degrees. If I wanted to just rotate randomly, then I click the rotate button and it would let me rotate sort of every point of the circle, or I can set it to a slightly different snapping degrees. And exactly the same with scale. So you can see it's going to snap scale in 0.25 amounts, or I can turn that off and have it scale nice and smoothly as well. Okay. And then we have the camera speed like we looked at before. Now, if you accidentally click this button, don't worry, you might be familiar with this, but it allows you to look around in your viewports and set all of these to different view modes. So I could have this one in wireframe. I could have this one in unlit mode, and I could have this one in Nanite if we're going to do the Nanite overview. And it just allows you to look at the scene in several different views. So I could set this one to be wireframe, and they're basically individual viewports as well. To get back out of this menu, you just need to press this button on whatever viewport you want to look at. Okay, so it's very similar to in Maya, but you can't use the spacebar for it. Spacebar doesn't do anything. Now, on our right-hand side, you'll see we have our world outliner. This is a list of objects that are in our scene, and you might notice that this is in alphabetical order of all the folders, and then also the subfolders are also in alphabetical order. This is the way Unreal works. You can rename things by clicking on them and pressing F2, and then typing in the new name, or you can right click on them and click rename. But you cannot move things around. It's got to stay in alphabetical order. You can group things together by shift clicking and right clicking and click group, or you can actually right click on the objects as well and you get this exact same menu. But for the most part, we're just going to use this menu to find objects that we have lost. So let's say I've flown all the way over here and I've lost where I need to be looking. I can just click on something which I know is in the center of the scene, such as the color calibrator, and press F to focus on that object, and it will snap me back to that view. So World Outliner is just there to show you everything you've got in your level. Next is the Details panel, and this will only become active when you have selected something. So I'm just trying to deselect. There we go. You can see Details panel is currently empty because I have nothing selected. But if I was to click on the color calibrator, you can see I have all the settings for the object that is selected. We have the usual transform settings of location, rotation, and scale. So you can see here that the scale is actually slightly too big. So to change this back, I could click on these and type in 1 for all of them, and it would change all of them. But we can also lock the padlock to keep it as a uniform scale, so I only have to adjust one of these and it takes it back to the normal scale. Now these also do work like a calculator, so if for some reason I can't remember what 2 times 1 would be to double the scale, you can do 1 asterisk 2 and then press equals and it will do the maths for you. So that can be quite useful as well. Then we have the settings. So the most common settings that we're going to be using within the detailed panels to begin with are the material settings. So under the materials tab, you can see here that we have 5 different what are called elements, but these are 5 different materials. And we can use this to navigate to the material. If we want to change a specific material, we can click the search button here and it will open up our content drawer to where that material is. And then we can double click on that. Or if we want to load up the material straight away, we can double click on the material itself and it will load up that material. Now, you might have seen the content drawer open. To open this yourself, you can either click the content drawer button down here, or you can press Control Space and it opens up the content drawer as well. Now, normally by default, it will load you into the content folder itself. And you also won't be able to see the engine content. I've turned that on by default just because I like to look through the blueprints, but normally you wouldn't have that there. You would just have these 3 folders. Now, important thing to note is never ever save individual individual assets in your content drawer. Only put folders here. So you can right click and click new folder and just call it My Stuff. Now you can put all your assets inside this folder. Unreal does have a tendency, if you put stuff into the content folder that isn't another folder, when you save it, it tends to get rid of it. So if you just create that new folder called My Stuff, or the name of the project, that sort of thing, then you should be all right. You can put your things back in that folder. Okay. And I do suggest you use as many folders as you can. Remember, no spaces just to keep stuff organized. So the content drawer is where everything that we bring into the game or create in the game is going to be, or the level, I should say. So if we wanted to create a new material, you just right click on material. Equally, if you want to create a new level, click level. Particle system is called Niagara in here. So if we wanted to do that, click on that. Or if you did want to delve into blueprints, and I will be doing another tutorial on blueprints at a later date, you can click on the blueprint class as well. You can also import things into the game by right-clicking and clicking import, or you can actually just drag and drop. So I have an asset ready to go. We're just going to drag and drop this asset in here, and you get this menu. Now, depending on what you've dragged and dropped, it might have a few things that you want to check. So if it's a skeletal mesh, you need to make sure that this has been ticked. Again, if it's like a rock or a set piece, you might want to think about building a nanite system just so that it works seamlessly with loading in and out at large or small or distances. And then also, if you're coming from a 3D software, different 3D software uses different uniform scale systems. So I know for coming in from Maya, you actually need to import with a 100 times scale increase because one unit in Maya is 100th of the size of the unit in Unreal. You can change this inside Maya, but and other 3D software. For example, I'm importing this model from Blender. I've changed the settings in Blender to match up with Unreal, so I don't have to do any uniform scaling. And then the rest of it, pretty much, we can leave as is. But we want to make sure that the materials are coming too, so make sure it's saying create new materials, and then we can click import all. And there we go. You know when it's imported because it will open up the content drawer in a separate window, and then you can just close all of this and also the message log down. We don't need that. So we can open up our content drawer, and you can see it's brought all of the materials in that were on the asset as well as the asset. Now to add something in from the content drawer, you just drag and drop that into your environment, and there you go. You can see it's dragged and dropped this. So this is the Jurassic Park Visitor Center that I've sort of prevised for this tutorial series. So this is the asset we're going to be using throughout. This asset is going to be available for you. It will be in Teams folder, or I might leave it in the description as well, just so that you have access to it if you want to follow along. So I have dragged in the asset inside my stuff folder, like I suggested, but this is going to get quite busy quite quickly with more assets that we bring in. So I always suggest creating a new folder, calling it models or assets, and then inside that folder actually creating subfolders of the specific asset that you're creating. So I'm just going to create one called Visitor Center. Then I hop back into my stuff, shift select everything, and then in this sort of file path system, I can drag and drop all of these assets into Visitor Center, and you can see we have several options here. We've got move here, copy here, or advanced copy here. Now I actually want to move everything, so I'm going to click copy here. Move. I actually want to move everything, so I'm going to click move here. But if you wanted to copy a material so that you can then edit it so that it becomes a different material, you might want to click copy here. But move here is going to work fine for me. And then it's just going to move everything over. Okay, so this is where we will have our assets now as well in our nice visitor folder, so that we know where that asset is being kept. And you can see, like I said earlier in the details menu, we have all of the assets materials pre-selected for us, so that we can now go through and change those. If by any chance you accidentally close any of your panels, so let's say I have accidentally closed the details panel, then don't worry, you can get that back. You can just go to Window, Detail, Detail 1, and then if it doesn't snap back, so let's say it accidentally sends it just as an extra panel, you can just drag and drop that to the tab systems, and then it'll allow you to go back to where you were. Same thing with World Outliner and any other extra windows that you might add in, because there are a lot of windows. You can also have multiple viewports. So if you are lucky enough to have a few monitors, you might want to add in a few viewports just to show different things. So what I generally do with mine is I set up one of my screens to be the editor, like I'm in now, and then my second screen I normally sort of have it snapped to the camera view so that I know exactly what the film is going to look like, and it just allows me to run everything slightly smoother. Sometimes I might put my sequencer or my content library up on a second screen as well, just so it's easier to use. Or you could utilize having several windows on one screen and several windows on the other as well. So whatever way you want to design your own UI, you can do so. And then once you have your layout set, you can actually save that layout as a layout file. And then every time you load up into a new project, you can just click load layout, and then you can actually save your own custom viewport layout, and then you can sort of know where everything is on your system, which is quite useful. For this tutorial series, I'm just going to stick to using the default, just so you guys know where everything is. Now, there are a couple more things that we need to go through. First of all, we might need to add in some plugins at an extra date. So to do that, you go to Edit, click on Plugins, and then search for a plugin. Now, every time you add a new plugin by checking a checkbox, you need to restart. So what I would do is make a list of the plugins you want to use, check them all to begin with, and then just restart. And then also we need to know how to save. So if you go to File, you can see that there is a lot of different types of save. Now, the safest one to use is Save All, which you can use the shortcut Control-Shift-S. Or if you just want to save time, you might want to click Save Current Level, and it just saves what you're working on. Now, usually, everything in your content drawer will be saved automatically because it actually saves it to a file directory on your computer. So you can crash and go back to having everything in your content drawer, but you will lose everything in your level setup. And that should be everything that you need to know for working on your working in the user interface for Unreal.